compañeros! Welcome to another edition of the SQL Database podcast, or as we like to call it, Matching SQL Trail Shirt Day. Obviously, Mariano's...
I have no idea what you're talking about.
This is episode 229, and it's always fun to circle back, as we plod on with this podcast. Did I say that out loud? As we continue with the podcast and changes, it's always nice to have friendly faces back. Well, we have to go way back. I didn't realize it had been this long, Mariano. Episode 59.
59, that's right.
That's all the way back in 2016. Right?
Years has been passed, yes.
I know. I mean, we were younger then, right?
That's right. I have more hair. It was another color.
Man, we were young people back then. Okay.
Of course, totally.
Well,
and even I think you have just came to Argentina in that time, I think, or what's the same year? I think.
Was that the year?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, I think I had been the year previous.
The previous year. Okay.
2015. Yeah.
Yeah, when you did the 10 episodes initially.
That's right. A lot of those were in Argentina. Yeah, that was in 2015. So yeah, man. So wow, it's been that long since I've been to Argentina. So I probably need to get back. Of course. Anyway, that's another story. Okay. Well, we're glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
Today we're talking about the data migration assistant. That's what it is, right? Data migration assistant. Wanted to we'll give that a little overview, give it some love, since we haven't given it love on the podcast before, right? Shame on us. So we'll do that today. But before we do that, first, our show notes for today's episode will be at sqldatapartners.com/DMA for Database Migration Assistant, or at /229 for the episode number. We also have a little, man, are we on a roll? Dare I say we have a trend now to SQL Server in the news in consecutive episodes. So last week we talked about 2016, and I guess Kevin, I have to let you give this one, since you're the one.
Yeah, last week we talked about SQL Server 2016 ending mainstream support, which isn't necessarily a giant thing at this point in time. They do still have one big service pack that they're expecting to put out sometime. And at that point, that'll be the last regular update. The last, we're going to go back and essentially backfill patches of things that happened in 2017 and 2019. Now we're in the extended support period for 2016, which is, or we're in the post-mainstream, but before end-of-life support. So security patches still will happen. Major emergency changes can still happen. So there can be irregular updates, but 2016's essentially reached a point of maturity. 2012 is 1 year away from basically going end of life. We are nearing the end of that 5-year window for the extended support, and July of 2022 is when that happens, which means that if you're running 2012, might be a good idea to start thinking about, how do I get further up? You may, but probably shouldn't jump to 2016, because we already said that's ending mainstream support. So maybe go further, 2017, 2019. I don't know how many people are just going to wait for vNext whatever year that comes out. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because right now, 2019 being the newest version, and there hasn't been doesn't seem like there's been an enormous adoption of it. I think that there are some really cool features that are very interesting for database administrators, database developers, but I think it's also been hindered by a few significant bugs that have made people shy away. And with 2017 having been it felt like for somebody like me, I enjoyed 2017 as a release.
Sure.
SQL Server on Linux, updates to Polybase, certain other things. But for what I would say would be the median database administrator, 2017 didn't really give you that much new stuff.
Sure.
And so I could see a lot of them just deciding, well, 2016, we can go with that. That was a lot of new stuff for mainstream database administrators. And so they've probably stuck with that, but you're reaching a point where it's time to move on.
Think about things. Yes, that's the next big hurdle, I think, is, and I'm sure we'll get into today is, so it used to be that there were some deprecated pieces. Now, I feel like there still are deprecated features, but they keep hanging around. Microsoft has been loath to kill features. It feels like once we got off of the 2005, they said, okay, we're gonna cut some stuff. Right now is a little bit painful for folks, but everything else that they've said is deprecated, they've kept supporting even into 2019. So the big change I feel like is the execution, or the execution plans. Right, the optimizer is probably the biggest headache for folks.
Yeah, but frankly, that was 2016. So
Sure.
by the time you got to 2016, you're using the new cardinality estimator, unless you're on old compatibility modes. But yeah, 2008 was that last version where they said, okay, we're going to actually remove things that we deprecated. Database mirroring is still around in 2019, despite it having been deprecated for almost a decade. You look at things.
And 2008 R2 compatibility is still there too.
True.
So
yeah, even though the norm has historically been you have the current version and the two prior versions officially supported in a release of SQL Server. But yeah, you're right. You could do 105 as your compatibility level. And my favorite thing, in the ending a T-SQL statement without a semicolon, which, by the way, has been deprecated since 2008, but we'll never get rid of. That was in the 2008 docs.
They're doing that for me, right? Because I get it. Keep your knives in your pockets, right? I get it, but I for whatever reason can't seem to quite always put that semicolon on there.
But, long story short, maybe a chance to upgrade. And if only there were some way to take a database and move it into somewhere like Azure SQL Database using some sort of assistant that may help you with this migration.
If only.
Sadly, although that was an outstanding pivot, although that was an incredible pivot, I think Carlos has more stuff before we can get there. So,
any good pivot deserves an interruption. Right. So before we do that and we talk about that, let's do a few shout outs, right? Lest the mob get even angrier with me for forgetting to do shout outs today. So John Nickerson, who I actually just talked with on LinkedIn today. Very nice. Thanks, John, for connecting. And I might add, who bought a t-shirt. So sqldatapartners.com/t-shirt. Remind me, Amanda, if it's plural or not. I can never remember all of a sudden. I think t-shirt or t-shirts, if you don't, one of them will get you there, right? You can buy a nice SQL Data Partners podcast t-shirt, help support the channel, and we appreciate John for doing that. And Amanda tells me both work. So if you just want to buy one t-shirt, if you're thinking about buying multiple, go to t-shirt stuff.
T-shirts.
And you'll be taken care of. Okay, we've got Melinda Dietrich Stewart, Jordan Osier, Damu Venkasen, Brock Barnett, Alan Hughes, Melvin Vargas from the Dominican, if I remember correctly. Thanks, Melvin. Trey Hayden, Drew Jones, Antonio Angel, Preston Messarvi he's from Atlanta. I'm sure I said that wrong, so I apologize, Preston. Matt Cushing, Needy Gupta, and Vance Jones. Some of our shout outs for today. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so um, with that aside, right? You were saying, Kevin, something about some kind of migration assistant that could help us.
Now I have no idea what you're talking about.
I can neither confirm nor deny. So the
No,
database.
he was wondering if there was a tool that can actually do the heavy lifting to migrate those databases that are old to like an Azure SQL database or a newer version of SQL Server. And actually, there is. Uh, Microsoft has that tool. It is free. You can download it from Microsoft.com. And it's basically a tool that you can make an assessment of your current database. It goes back to 2005. You can actually assess 2005 databases. So yes, Microsoft is still currently supporting deprecated features or deprecated versions. And it actually will tell you if your database objects or your database code that you have on those databases are compatible with the destination SQL Server that you choose. It could be either way, on-prem, or it can be a SQL Azure offering, right?
Sure.
This tool has been there since 2016. So
Now,
it has a couple of years, a couple of versions.
Yeah, if you've been away for a little while, because admittedly, when we started taking a peek at that, I'm like, oh, the upgrade advisor.
Yeah,
The upgrade advisor.
there is no more upgrade advisor.
Right?
But I would say it would be a good idea to have those binary some way in a CD or wherever. So if you have an older version, like a 2005, I would recommend to run that upgrade advisor.
Okay.
Because that has the compatibility level go back to 2000. So if you have an old SQL Server database that has been put on SQL Server 2005, but has previous compat levels, I wish you don't have that, but that upgrade advisor can give you at least a hint if you have very old code over there. Then you can actually run the database migration assistant and have the two results to compare.
Sure. Now, just having said that, right? If I'm going to upgrade anything besides 2000, or if previous to 2012, right? I feel like I'm just going to spin up a VM in Azure. A 2008 VM, and I'll just do everything there, right? Because yeah, you have to fix all your stuff there, and then I go from there, right? I don't know. That's my
I have some projects that has the situation that has very old databases, Windows 2003 and SQL Server 2005, and we have to run the upgrade advisor first and then take a backup from that SQL Server and restore it on a newer version like 2008 R2, and then run the database migration assistant as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so we should, I guess we've kind of let the cat out of the bag if we haven't said this, right? So the database migration assistant does more than just migrate databases. It can now help me find out what issues I might have. So what are some of the common issues that we're finding when we run the database migration assistant?
Okay, basically you have code compatibility like ANSI joins, or it will actually tell you if you have deprecated features like image or text columns and those kind of problems. And besides code, it will actually say that if you're using any feature from the instance or any instance feature that is not compatible with the destination target that you choose. For example, if you are going from SQL Server on-prem to SQL Azure DB, if you're using, for example, CLR code, it will tell you this is not compatible with your destination as well.
Yeah, so I think initially, well, I guess I shouldn't say that, but I feel like the database migration assistant was definitely trying to get folks into Azure SQL Database, right? And they needed a good way to do that. And then I'm not sure if they added it later or if that was, it eventually came, right? The upgrade piece. And
Yeah, it was at the very beginning. It actually always give you the option to say destination SQL Azure. But of course, SQL Azure has been evolving. So eventually, with different versions, the compatibilities were less and less.
right. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And so I did notice that, taking a peek again in preparation for this, that they do release new versions of that, the DMA tool fairly frequently. Again, I think because Azure continues to evolve, right? So they can add tweaks and and whatnot in there. So kind of like we talked about, not so perhaps a tangent, but deprecated features. I feel like at one time, deprecated features was kind of a scary word, but kind of like we mentioned at the beginning of the program, they keep supporting them.
That's right.
They're non-breaking.
Exactly, non-breaking changes.
Right.
Yeah, you can still run them, but
Yeah. So what?
Right.
you don't know when Microsoft will cut it off.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
still
I mean,
there.
it seems like what's happened was we were talking up to the 2008 era. 2008, they cut things out. They removed things.
Right.
But then as of about 2012, they just stopped removing them and instead simply said, well, we're not going to support it. We're not going to invest any dev effort in making it better. It's deprecated, but it'll still be there. That way, if you go to upgrade to the next version of SQL Server, you won't find out, oh, this thing that I was one of 4 customers who relied on it is no longer here, and oh well, we can't upgrade anymore.
Sure. Yeah. In terms of features, right? Mirroring is one that jumps out to me, right? That still a lot of people are using because they, for whatever reason.
Yeah, or even like you said, image or text data types.
Yeah. The data.
Those things have been deprecated for 12 years, 12 years or so, maybe 15 years. You get to about 2000. I forget if they were officially deprecated in 2005. I know that's when we got varchar max and var binary max, but they've been deprecated for a very long time, and yet they're still here because people have databases that they just haven't changed over to use the correct data type.
One of the common scenarios that I have here, at least in Argentina, is that many third-party applications that they are only certified with specific versions. They keeping the code, moving versions, but keeping the same code as 10 years ago. So.
Yep, because otherwise you may have to go through that certification process again.
The only way to get those databases in a newer version is keep the compat level as they were previously. Keep the code running.
Right.
But and this could still be helpful to let you know, right? Hey, what do I have to do? To keep that up and running. So there are also so let's see, behavior changes. Now I know it talks a little bit about here, but I was trying to think. I don't know that I have good examples of behavior changes that it's going to suggest. Can you recall one of those?
I think most of them are the way you specify the joins.
Okay. And that's, again, kind of going back to some of the older code.
That's right. Yeah. And the database migration assistant actually says that this is a behavior change. This code can lead to bad plans when you run this code.
Okay.
That's it. Mostly the changes by the cardinality estimator change that came in 2014, and at least prevents you or give you a hint to where to look if after migration you have any performance issues.
Right.
Maybe it's related to those bad plans.
So because it's going to review the database, right, it's worth saying that you have to have sysadmin rights on the box, right, to run it, because it's going to want to get, up close and personal with your database. I haven't noticed it being super intrusive. However, right on the larger databases, well, I shouldn't say larger databases, that's not the right word. On the databases with lots of objects, right? It can, it's a little bit more, it can be a little bit more needy, right? Because it just has more things to review. Not necessarily from a size perspective, but from a.
That's right. Yeah. Depends on how many objects do you have on those databases, because it's eventually read all the internal information of those objects. So if the more objects you have, the more time the tool will take to run.
Sure. Now, what's your take on migrating with DMA? Are you doing database migrations with DMA, or you do that in a different way?
Okay, you have the option. Actually, when you start the tool and you perform the assessment, you have to choose if you are going to do only an assessment or you're going to migrate itself, the database. It depends.
I want to talk to the person. So, compañeros, if you've read it for the first time and have migrated a database, I want to talk to you.
That would be the YOLO contingent.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you actually decide to migrate, and for example, if you choose to move to SQL Azure Database, it will create the schema and the objects only.
Got you. Okay, I knew there was a reason I didn't like it, because I was going to say, I feel like I have well, obviously if I'm doing on-premise, right, I'm using different ways of doing that, right? Backup, restore, type processes. And if I'm going to Azure SQL Database, I feel like the backpack is still the way to go for me, right?
Yeah, it is almost the only way to go to there. Yes.
Yeah.
And can it be very painful if you have a lot of a big quantity of objects or a lot of data? It could be very painful.
Sure.
Imagine in countries like mine that we are far, far away from the Azure data centers, we will take a lot of time to move those pieces.
Yeah, or if you don't have, say, express route from your company's network into the Azure data center, you're capped to whatever you can push over the internet, and that may not be huge for a small business.
Right.
I was actually working with a client here that has a banking solution, the core banking solution, that has more than 10,000 tables. They install it on a SQL Azure database, and they have 1 terabyte of data over there. And they are trying actually to take a full backup due to regulations. They have to have a physical backup. Trying to make a backup with backup and with backpack history, and somehow in the middle of the process is timeout, and the connection is cut, and we have to relaunch the whole backup again every night. Yeah.
Ooh,
so they were asking, how can we move away from SQL database? Okay, we understood that this is not the best model to fit. Can we move to another tier, like a managed instance? Or yes, you have to do a backpack to move out from SQL database, and that represents a lot of time, like 6 or 8 hours without service.
Right.
Because backpack and that kind of movement is not transactionally consistent backup, so you have to cut the application and put the database offline, basically. So in those cases, the database migration assistant is not helping.
Not yet, not helpful.
Not yet.
Man, yeah. So we'll see. Hopefully, as in that specific case, as managed instance becomes more, dare I say, prevalent, right? It still feels like it's a very new feature, right? I think people are kicking the tires, but I'm not sure what the adoption rates. I'm not speaking for Microsoft, but from my own personal experience, it just seems like it's trailing, right? But I feel like as that becomes you know, I don't want to say part of the core, for lack of a better word, that they'll make that process better. I have to imagine. Or at least I hope.
That's right. Yeah. It's kind of the best of the worlds. You have not a single database, not a VM. It's like be in the middle of the thing. But there are some limitations as well. It's still a platform as a service solution, so there are still some limitations. But it's like have a good sense to, if you have to migrate on-prem things like they are very old or they have some constraints, perhaps it could be a good idea to start testing on that tier and not spinning up a VM that will end up with more costs.
Sure. So go ahead. Did you want to jump in or? No, okay. So it's probably worth mentioning so that the DMA tool will review the other pieces of the engine, right? Like integration services and analysis services, but you have to run that separately as well, right? It's not just hey, right, check, if I have a service installed, go check it. It's a configuration and a run for each service, if you will.
For each service, that's right, yeah, for each feature. And if I not remember well, you have a parity check feature that will tell you that if you are running multiple services like integration services, analyze services, or if you are using SQL Server agent jobs on that instance, it will tell you, hey, if you want to go to SQL Azure, this is not a way to go. You have to use another technology like, for example, Azure Data Factory for packages or Elastic jobs to replace SQL Server agent jobs or wherever.
Yeah, but that, it hopefully, while it's nice that it tells you that, hopefully from an architecture perspective, you're still reviewing, right, what's available, because when you start going to Azure services, the world will look a lot different. And so you'll need,
you have 3 or 4 different ways of getting to the same answer.
Right. So.
Correct.
Okay, let's see. So we've talked about getting it there, the services. Let's see, what else? Other things that we may have missed with the Azure the migration assistant? The SQL migration assistant?
I've got a question. Have you run into any experiences with the database migration assistant where you look at the results and you say, oh, this is just way off, or it completely missed the boat on this recommendation?
I think not in terms of database code, right? But I didn't have any bad experience at all. Most of the time is very accurate on the problems that you may have. But I would say that it resolves 80% of the problem. You always get 20% that it's outside the database, like dynamic application code that can be run, and that's a piece that this tool.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Right, so it can only review stored procedures if you've got
views, triggers, all inside the database. You can actually review a trace, but you need to set up a trace, wait for the time to run, and capture all the things that normally you end up missing, at least the day that transaction runs, and perhaps maybe incompatibility there.
Right.
You can actually put the trace inside the tool, and it will review the code for that trace.
Yeah, but in terms of, from my 2 cents, like, has it ever missed something? With the exception of the disclaimer we just said about the code, right? That the ad hoc queries. I've never had it miss anything, right? Like, you upgrade it and it's like, oh, we didn't know about that. So.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add that I normally do after when I migrate to a newer version is like taking a baseline of performance, because you never know what's going to run or how it's going to run on the newer version or the newer platform. And that is outside from the tool itself. The performance baseline, it's outside the tool. So you have to take a baseline before and take a baseline after and make a comparison. We have other tools like Query Store or other things to do that, to ensure that performance will be at least the expected that you will have. But that is outside the database migration assistant tool.
Sure. So let me ask the analog question, which is, how often do you see recommendations which you look at and you say, it's not really that important. That's not really relevant.
Mostly the deprecated features, Because at this point, I'm not expecting that Microsoft will take out those features. Like, for example, the image text, it's not relevant for the application side. Or, I don't know, change the right server to try-catch sentence. That's a very common one. It keeps working. That's the things that I don't care a lot.
Right. Again, those deprecated features that we just keep using, right?
I don't believe in anymore. They keep telling for 5 versions for now.
So we should note. So shout out here to SQL Nikon down in Elon, or he may be in Greensboro. I guess depends on where he's working today. So his 2 cents, or his experience, I should say, rather, is that he's used a tool in migrating databases, and it's worked great. So he was using 2014 or 2012, 2014, and then went to 2019 and had a good experience with it. So
great.
There you go. But I know that Doug likes to run a clean shop down there, right? So I'm sure that he didn't have a whole lot of riffraff in his databases.
That's fair.
And what was there, I'm sure he just had George take care of him. So. Okay, very good. Let's see, what else? Last thoughts on Database Migration Assistant, Mariano?
Okay, actually, I know it's not actually a database migration assistant, but you can use another tool that Microsoft provides if you're considering the cloud as a cloud solution. If you are willing to go to Azure, you can complement the database migration assistant with another tool that is the Azure Migrate solution. But that's basically, it creates a project on Azure that will assess your current environment. And eventually will assess the SQL Server databases as well. And it will tell you, it's more like a, let's say, hardware assessment, not only the code. And it will tell you if you're running a SQL Server on this server or on this VM, you can move it to an equivalent on Azure that you have to create this VM with this characteristic to move your database here.
Oh, gotcha.
And it actually can make the move.
Gotcha. So is it more of like a VM to VM move type thing?
It's one scenario, yeah. And it actually will if you're moving SQL Server VMs, you can actually specify locations for backups, and the tool will make automated backups and restore them into Azure. It's a complementary tool.
Sure. And remind us of the name of that tool really quick.
Azure Migrate. If you go to Azure portal, log into Azure, and search for Azure Migrate, it will create a project, and then you have to download an agent in your SQL Server VM or SQL Server server, and install that agent, and that will give you the assessment.
Very cool. Okay. So it's been long enough. Our SQL family questions have changed. Should we go ahead and do SQL family? Da-da-da. I need some music for that. Okay, so remind us. I know we asked you this, but it's been many, many episodes ago. How did you first get started with SQL Server?
I was 6.0, 6.5. It was a long time ago. I was a kid almost. But yes, I have to install. I can remember human resources software or something like that, and the requirement says you have to install a SQL Server, and that's how I started with SQL Server.
There we go. Interesting. Now, what advice would you give to someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours?
Very difficult in these times. When I started, I have 1 or 2 books to read, and that was everything of SQL Server. The good thing of today, you have access to a lot of things. They are online, but I think that my advice would be at least not pursue knowing everything. Just make a precise decision. At least, well, I want to know this precisely, and then keep adding things. Not try to get the whole thing together.
Yeah. What is one thing that can instantly make your day better?
It's my background, but here is the mate. You know, in Argentina, we drink a lot of mate. I cannot start a good day without the mate.
Okay. Now, you sugar or no sugar?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Really doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Very good. So you've got $10,000, which
963,000 pesos.
yeah, I was gonna say that it's gonna go a little further in Argentina these days. What computer tech would you purchase?
Carlos is mailing it to you. It's just getting the currency exchange just took a little while, so that's why it hasn't arrived yet.
But the problem is that I can get it. I can get them here. Yeah, you know, the government will take those dollars and they give me pesos.
Yeah.
I really don't know, but perhaps I would start with a new phone. My phone is very old, so, but it's a lot of money. You know, 10K. I can spin up a whole new studio here, lights, cameras, wherever.
Which famous person in history would you want to spend the day with?
History. Difficult one. Tech related or wherever?
Anything. Living or dead.
Wow.
Presumably, you would be talking to them while they were living. Otherwise, it'd be a very boring conversation.
Okay. Oh, well, I don't think about it. It's perhaps I would like to speak to. I love physics, so perhaps Einstein or Stephen Hawking would be nice to chat with.
There we go.
Very nerd, but that's what I like.
Sure, very cool. And our last question for you today, Mariano, what is your favorite ice cream topping?
Okay, we have a problem here. In Argentina, we don't have toppings.
No topping.
Oh, it's just the ice cream, you know.
What's your favorite flavor then?
Oh, flavor. Oh, we have here one is dulce de leche. I don't know if there any translation over there, but it's a milk caramel or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, we would call it the same and just mispronounce it.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, that would be the Italian version of it. Yeah.
That's right.
Dulce de leche has caught on here in the States, and I think other places, but yeah, it's not always quite the same. But it is there, depending on where you go. Okay, well, awesome. Well, very good. Mariano, thank you for being on today.
A pleasure as always. It was a long time. Yeah.
Hopefully it won't be that long again, right? Before we get you back on. So, and now, we've gone this whole way. So Eugene wasn't here to remind us. And I can't say compañeros, right? This is, we are still at the idea phase, right? But the idea has not left us. How about that? Of trying a Spanish language podcast. We'll see. I think about the folks over there at SQL Server Radio, and they do English and Hebrew, and I'm like, oh gosh. Now the benefit is that I guess you just get the content for one, and you got to translate it, do it in a different language, right? So I guess there is that, right? We don't have to do two different shows with two different content. That would be too hard. But we'll see. Okay, so Mariano, if folks want to reach out to you, and I guess before I do that, let me just double check our delegation. So before I let you go, if folks wanted to reach out to you, might have questions or comments, how can they reach you?
My Twitter account is Mariano_Kovo. Instagram is the same, I think. And my email is mariano.kovo@gmail.com, so you can reach me out as well.
There we go. Awesome. And Mr. Fiesel?
You can reach me through Twitter, but that's been deprecated since 2008.
So good luck. Get it in soon, right? Before they gotta shut it off forever. And compañeros, you, like Mr. John and also Nicholson, like John Nicholson, can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am at Carlos El Chacon. And there are a couple of you that I have not gotten back with, and I apologize if you're like, hey, I tried to link up with you and you haven't gotten back to me. I have not forgotten you. I will do that, but that's still the best place to get me. So thanks again for tuning in. Again, our show notes today, sqldatapartners.com/DMA or at 229. Thanks for being here, Mariano, Kevin, and compañeros.
Very much.
I'll see you on the SQL Trail.
SQL Data Partners.